Welcome to the Sierra Vista City Council work session for November 10, 2020. Everybody is here with the exception of Mrs. Pacheco, who gave her regrets earlier. We go to item number 2, A, which is the council meeting minutes for the 12th. And of course, we start with a call to order. Roll call, invocation pledge, acceptance of the agenda, and then the city manager's report. Mr. Patichik, anything on the city manager's report you'd like to share with us today?
Not yet, Mr. Mayor. We'll have a JPA board meeting for CCOM Thursday, so I'll be able to give you an update on that.
Okay. First item is a public hearing item. Item number 2, it's a substantial amendments to the 5-year CDGB. Mr. McLaughlin.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, good afternoon. This amendment package concerns assigning the intended use of the second round of CARES Act funding via the city's Community Development Block Grant Program. Based on the direction that we received during your October 6th work session, we advertised the full amount of $239,351 being allocated towards the Emergency Crisis Fund for COVID-19 response, which is reflected in the amendments. If approved, staff will amend the subrecipient agreement with United Way to assign the funding in accordance with the proposal that was presented to you with the same reporting requirements. At this point in time, we're anticipating the funding to reach the nonprofit partners starting next month. This arrangement has worked very well in getting out assistance to community members in need in an efficient and effective manner. And with that, I'll take any questions.
And the only question I think we missed is we were required to have a 5-day public comment period. That will end on Thursday, even though it's been more than 5 days.
It actually already ended, and the city has received no comments.
Okay, and that's what I wanted you to tell us. Okay. Any questions, discussion? Yes, sir.
I'll be recusing myself.
Okay.
Once again.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We'll now go on to item number 3. It's a new liquor license permit. Ms. Adams.
Mayor Mueller, members of council, this is basically a record-keeping change of ownership for the Fast Mart, which is on the corner of 92 and Fry. It's the Valero. It's the shop at the Valero station at 3999 Fry Boulevard. The posting of the public meeting has been on the premise for in excess of the required 20 days, and no comments have been received from the public, pro or con. The police department has done the required background check and has no objection to this transfer moving forward, and if approved on Thursday night, it will be forwarded back to the state for final action and issuance.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Any questions from Ms. Adams on this item? All right, thank you, Ms. Adams. We now move to new business. Item number 4 is the approval of the regular minutes for the city council meeting of 22 October 2020. Any additions, corrections, amendments, discussion? Okay, we'll move on then to item number 5. And that is the intergovernmental agreement with Cochise County for court co-location. Ms. Yarber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So this is an entirely new agreement from what you saw in September, although fundamentally it has many similarities to the other agreements that you've seen and considered. So this is a co-location agreement, not a consolidated court agreement, and it will allow the city to use the justice court space for 4 hours once a month to handle cases that come up from violations of city codes or ordinances, which run about 8 to 10 a year, and those are mostly code violation, like property violations, animal control violations, and so on. We do not have that many of those cases that get cited into the magistrate court. So it also allows the city to directly appoint its city magistrate through whatever means it desires. In this case, the agreement appoints the Justice of the Peace pro tem and also requires that person to be a lawyer. The county would then also cover the expense of the pro tem acting as the city magistrate, as well as providing all court staff services, et cetera, for operation of the magistrate court. It removes the justice of the peace from the equation entirely, and as you notice, they're not a signatory on the agreement. So overall, there aren't any other operational changes compared to the other agreements. PD will still cite cases into the justice court as they do now, and so on. And financially, the funding formula is also finished, and the methodology remained the same from what you saw earlier, although we did simplify it quite a bit. You'll also see that the funding formula is applied to every other city in the county that uses the same type of setup as well. So what we did for the funding formula, we took the percentage of cases that are cited into the justice court by the Sierra Vista Police Department, calculated out of all the cases that are cited into the court, and so we made up 46% of the total cases cited into the justice court. And then that percentage was applied to the total operational costs for the court and the revenue, which the revenue number was then subtracted from our share of the operational costs. So that total number came out to $276,807, which is paying for our share of the civil traffic, and misdemeanor cases that the justice court handles that we would otherwise could cite into a municipal court if one existed. So and that's our amount for next fiscal year, 21-22. We'll still pay $161,000 for the current fiscal year. And then moving forward, we would apply this formula by March 1st, so you can see in the budget process what our cases or what our amount would be for the next year based on the data collected from the previous fiscal year. So the term of the agreement then would be from January 1st, 2021 through June 30th of 2022, with automatic one-year renewals each year after. And the Board of Supervisors will also consider this agreement on their November 17th meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the council?
Do we need to appoint a magistrate?
So this agreement appoints the magistrate as part of the agreement, and so it would appoint the Justice of the Peace pro tem as the city magistrate. That person currently is Judge Raymaker, who is the city's interim city magistrate.
So we don't need to do that.
You would not have to take that additional step. The way this was set up for other communities is if you so desired, you could go out, you could do a request for proposals, you could accept applicants, you could interview and enter into an agreement directly with a person to act as your magistrate and then pay that person separately. The way this is set up is by using the Justice of the Peace pro tem, they're already paid as a court employee, and so the city would not, it would not cost you any additional money to appoint this person as the city magistrate.
I see.
So I think maybe the question was, is there a separate need for us to additionally appoint an individual by name as magistrate, or is that an option we have?
No, Mr. Mayor, it is an option you have, and the agreement could be adjusted if that's what you wanted. The way the agreement that is proposed to you is set up, the agreement also appoints your magistrate directly, so you would not have to take a separate action.
I think what I don't understand too is what was that part about the use co-locating in the court? What's
So the agreement states that it is separating out the justice court and the magistrate court. And so this allows the magistrate court to operate within the justice court for 4 hours a month, each month. We do not typically need 4 hours a month, I wouldn't say, with 8 to 10 cases a year on average. So it's co-locating that court, but it's keeping it separate in a way. So you could still appoint your own magistrate if you desired.
So how were we doing it previously?
The previous agreement was a consolidated court agreement, and so the county and the city and the court were agreeing that the municipal court was consolidated into the justice court, and they were essentially one and the same.
And
Okay, then, one more.
that brought in the need for then the JPs to sign off on the agreement. Wording it this
Oh,
way,
okay.
then removes that requirement.
I see. Okay. Okay, I think I get it.
Ma'am?
So I just have a couple of questions, and for the public benefit, because we are talking about different agreements and, but the same funding formula, can you just expound on why we still use that same formula even though it's now going to be a separate court? And I put that in quotation marks, but.
Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, what we're paying for the $276,807, that's our civil traffic, and misdemeanor cases that are cited into the Justice Court. Those are the cases that theoretically, if a city did operate its own court, we could cite those cases directly into that court. So we are paying the county and the Justice Court Precinct 5 to handle those cases for us.
Thank you. And then my second question.
Oh, just
Oh,
one other
sorry.
thing, Rachel, on that. One of the goals here was to be able to tell the public what they're paying for. So by this payment is for these, traffic, civil cases and misdemeanors. So our extra payment is for that. The taxpayers are paying for the rest of the court through their tax bills to the county. So now we can clearly define what it is we're paying for. Unfortunately, it is more than what we were paying for, but I think we were probably getting a pretty good deal.
I agree, and I think it's better to have clarity and transparency as well, so.
And there are 7 pages of detail in Exhibit A if you want to go through exactly how we got to all those numbers.
Yes, and I, before I get to my second question, I do, and since we're talking about the formula, is say thank you to Victoria for working so hard through this and getting us to a place where we can be transparent to the public about exactly what we're paying for, so thank you for that. On the 4 hours, and I just looked back to make sure I didn't miss it, does that roll over just in case we got, I don't know, we needed 8 hours one month for some reason? Would that, do those hours roll over?
Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I don't know if they roll over, but what I suspect is the hours, what I'm told is they'd be most likely on a Friday, and there are no cases heard on Fridays in the court. So if we needed additional time, I'm sure we could work it out. Or if the time went over the exact 4-hour allotment, I think Judge Conlog just felt it was best to specify a certain amount of time. I am sure we could work with them to get the time we needed.
Okay, and I just wanted to be clear, I know sometimes we can't get everything in contracts, but, and I know that will probably like 1 every 10 years, but just to be sure that we have some sort of a knowledge that we can use more, especially when most months we probably won't use that at all.
I think the number 4 was settled on because it would generally far exceed the amount of time we would,
Okay.
or any of the cities would need, because the 8 to 10 is, I guess, relatively consistent, although other cities actually have less than that.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
Mr. Petichik?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Rachel, I just too want to commend Judge Conlog, who's been very helpful in this process. Rich Kawachka, the new county administrator, has been very good to work with, and Dan Duchan working with Victoria as well. And of course, Victoria did a great job, as you mentioned.
Absolutely.
It was a team effort.
Showed a lot of patience.
With us. Yeah, with us as well as the county.
Yes.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. Great job, Victoria. Let's see, item number 6 is the proposed amendments to Infill Incentive District Policy. Mr. McLaughlin.
Okay, so today we're looking for your input and guidance on recommended policy adjustments to the Infill Incentive District. The policy is now 15 years old, and there are parts that are no longer relevant and need updating. We understand that this is the first draft and may require additional discussion beyond today's work session to hammer out the fine details. There is nothing rushing this resolution, okay? So the purposes of this policy is to encourage the reuse and redevelopment of vacant and underutilized properties in the West Sierra Vista planning area and the Cloud 9 planning area. And there are 3 categories of incentives that are authorized by state statutes. 1 is relief from development standards, 2 is expedited permitting, and 3 is waivers of municipal fees. We provided strikeout and underlined copy with your packet, and I'll do my best to explain the proposed changes. The first area we'd like your feedback on concerns the implementation section. Currently, incentives are authorized on a case-by-case basis through the development agreement process. There have been 15 agreements approved by council since this policy was first enacted. The waivers that were granted generally concerned development code requirements pertaining to setbacks, landscaping, parking areas, infrastructure, and drainage. Now, the focus of this council has been on streamlining and making our processes more predictable and efficient. It's through this lens that we develop our annual work program with the Planning and Zoning Commission. And that's what we're recommending here. We're asking you to consider adding specific criteria to the policy that the city manager would administer within the limits that you set. The flexibility that you appoint is most needed on the West End, where we're often dealing with first-time developers on limited budgets with difficult properties. Our economic development team, as you know, heavily promotes the West End as a great place to locate a business, and the incentives that the city offers help drives that conversation forward. While they may not make or break a deal, they do carry some weight in the decision-making process. Now, with respect to fee waivers, I want to be crystal clear here that we're not proposing a change to how development fee reductions are approved. That procedure is set in the Development Fee Ordinance, which mandates that any waiver approved must be approved by development agreement by the city council. If the city council grants an exemption, the city must offset the amount of that exemption from the general fund. What we are proposing with this policy is a waiver to the permit application and plan review fees that are simply lost permit revenue to the city's general fund. Essentially, commercial, mixed-use, or multifamily development projects would be eligible for a free site plan or building permit plan review using staff resources that are already on the payroll. Provided here, and this is where the criteria comes in, the project, 1, eliminates blight, 2, adds employment, 3, and these are ORs, connected by ORs, substantially improves an existing vacant or underutilized property, or makes the building or site conforming to currently adopted building and development codes. The value of this incentive is going to vary based on the scope of the project. For a tenant improvement like 143 Street Taco, the value of the fee waiver would amount to about $4,500. For ground-up construction like Tombstone Brewery, the permit and plan review fees are just over $17,000. The city manager would weigh the economic return to the city in determining the amount of the waiver that is granted. Now, with respect to policy, if you want to put in a maximum dollar amount or a percentage cap on the amount of the waiver, we can insert that limitation into the policy. With respect to development code standards, the proposed policy specifically excludes single-family zone properties. We think the code amendments that you previously approved provide the necessary relief within the infill incentive districts. The challenge here in setting up the evaluation criteria is providing definition without being over-limiting. We can't anticipate every scenario that's going to arise. For the initial draft, I borrowed from the criteria from a community redevelopment district in Florida where I previously worked as a director. We understand that the first criteria, which requires the alternative to achieve the purpose of the requirement through superior design, efficiency, or performance, requires the most professional judgment. Staff would need to establish that the proposed alternative provides through means, methods, and materials the same or better outcome than the standard requires. It's written to encourage creativity and innovation. We can amend or strike that provision if it's not precise enough for you, as it relies on interpreting the spirit and intent of the applicable code provision. The second criteria is similar to the standard we use in variance cases, which relates to the technical impracticalities that arise from the shape, size, and unusual characteristics of the lot. And the third waiver criteria pertains to the protecting or preserving view sheds, natural features, or important landmarks on property. The proposed procedure is modeled after the current administrative modification process for amending setbacks. Neighboring property owners would be notified and have appeal rights either to the city council or the administrative hearing officer. After some back and forth, we're now recommending the administrative hearing officer adjudicate appeals. So we would make that change if you agree. So that's the essence of the proposed policy changes. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. McLaughlin?
Yeah, I just have a couple quick questions, just so I kind of understand. I just want to understand exactly
Sure.
what you're saying. When I'm looking here and you're talking about the appeal process, are you talking about here, and I don't have the page number, I don't know, it says 4 out of 10 on mine. But I
Relief
don't
from
see-
development code provisions.
So it says an aggrieved person may file. So are you talking about the person who is applying, or somebody who you just said got notice and then wanted to appeal, or are we talking about both?
It would be a person with standing, so it could be both.
Okay. So, but there is, no matter what happens, there is an appeal process either way.
Yes.
Well, and Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Wolf, we discussed this yesterday. Carolyn called and we had a pretty good discussion on this. And if, for example, a developer came in and wanted fee waiver, or that kind of thing, I said no, or whatever, or half, or whatever it was, they didn't like that. It wouldn't be necessarily telling them no. We would have to come back to them and tell them, well, if you want something else, we need to have a development agreement, and the council would need to approve that agreement. So in effect, you would be the ultimate appeal on something like that, if they didn't like the administrative decision that I would make within the policy.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I just have a few things. I'll just start with my thoughts on the provisions. I do think that, and I'm looking at the relief from development code standards. Those provisions are what I'm talking about. I'm perfectly fine with numbers 2 and 3. I think they're very clear. I think they're very defined. I would ask Matt, will you repeat the statement you just said? Your mic was on. Sorry, that's okay. So I was having problems hearing myself. Can you repeat the statement? You said something that I thought actually made it a little more clear in your presentation just now about provision 1.
Okay.
Can you just maybe reread what you said?
So what would need to be demonstrated by the applicant is that the proposed alternative provides through means, methods, materials, the same or better outcome than the standard requires. And the purpose of this is to foster innovation and creativity. So if there's a better way to accomplish the same standard, they would have to satisfy the staff who would be making a recommendation to the city manager that the alternative fulfills the intent of the code provision.
So when you say superior design, I just want to make sure real clear. When you say superior design, that means better than the code as it stands. Okay. I think that clears that definition up. We talked earlier, but a glossary of terms, I think, for some people, because even though my background allows me to understand this a little more, I still have problems with some of these terms. But so that covers superior design. Now let's talk about efficiency and performance. How would we judge that?
Well, again, trying to anticipate the scenario, we have performance-based alternative in the building code. This would be extended to the development code. So superior, equal to, achieving the same performance as what would ordinarily be required through the code requirement would have to be proven by the applicant. So they would have to make a case, they would present that case, we would evaluate the case, based on the nature of the proposal and make a determination on whether the performance is
Meets or
the same,
exceeds.
meets or exceeds.
Okay. Where I'm having problems, and it's what I said to Matt earlier today, is we've worked really hard in the codes to make things less subjective. And I don't know that having a policy that is more subjective, as I feel, and I'm only applying this to this one statement, not standard 2 and 3. This is only for standard 1. Is I'm trying to, in my mind, get past or figure out, and we don't have to have the answer today, it's just food for thought, but a way to be not so subjective. One, I don't think it's fair to Chuck as being the one to make those decisions with the recommendation of staff, or to a hearing officer, because developers, builders, they like to know going in what their expectations are. So I'm just trying, I don't have the answer today. I'm just trying to work through that, and that's where I'm having a little issue on that particular standard, is it's just too subjective to me.
Maybe just clarifying that superior design, in comparison to the standards in the development code, maybe just adding, or so we don't have to strike the whole thing out, maybe adding.
Right.
the
My question
clarification.
is right. I mean, some things are super easy. So, efficiency on electricity, that's obvious what's superior, right, to the code. Aesthetically, it's not as clear.
Right.
That's where,
There's too much interpretation
Yeah.
needed.
yeah.
We do have design standards, though. Would it be better to call that out, maybe?
To add it.
Or guidelines?
Well, it doesn't apply only to building architecture. It could be site design.
Right. Okay.
No, I share
This
that
is
same
just a
concern.
sticky thing for me. I'm just
Yeah.
I see what you're
It's a
talking
good point. It's a good point to raise.
I'm just trying to work through that. That is actually my only gripe, so to speak. I don't even like that word, but that's the only thing that's causing me hesitation on this, is just that one standard and how to just make it more defined. And while everybody's really quiet, I'll move back to when you talked about the development fees. One thing that came to mind is when we waive those, and Chuck, I know you already do this, but maybe again, having a definition of what is, if we waive, let's just say $15,000, just for an easy number, what are the number of years it will take us to return that? Maybe do we have a policy for that already, and I don't know about it?
Well, go ahead.
The Development Fee Ordinance outlines the types of community benefits that are eligible for consideration for a waiver to the development fees. One, like affordable housing, doesn't necessarily return
That's right.
taxes back to the city, so that wouldn't be applicable in that case. But for a commercial project in an infill incentive district involving a blighted property, there would be probably multiple facets that would be evaluated in terms of the community benefits, fiscal being one of them, but also our redevelopment objectives.
Right.
So, and that's by development agreement, so all that information would be presented to council for their full consideration. And the fiscal aspect would be part of our staff report and presentation to you.
But we're not doing a development agreement on this.
Or development fee waivers. By code, those are only done
That's for
by-
development impact fees. We're
For
talking two different.
I'm talking two different things.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
okay.
And I
Same
should
thing.
be,
Yes, we-
yeah, sorry, I should be using a different term. So let's just,
These are plan review and permit fees.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's what I'm asking. Would we look at, is there a way that we could develop a policy? And again, just food for thought, because I don't see us being ready for this on Thursday. But food for thought is have some sort of policy with a formula that we can waive, if we can waive fees up to when we would see a certain return.
Yeah,
From-
when Carolyn
from
called us
property or-
yesterday about this, so we had a discussion about it, and it is, you know, right now we have a policy that I can grant fee waivers for these types of projects, and typically I've only done it for nonprofit organizations. I haven't done it for commercial. This would give us the opportunity to provide that, you know, some sort of incentive, you know, for these types of projects. But what makes it difficult is you have different projects. I mean,
Right.
consistency is a
Right.
problem. You got, you know, as Matt said, you got a smaller project, a small amount of fees versus a larger one that has another. And I could see where, you know, for me, it's easier to say, well, the council policy is this.
Right.
And I either decide yay or nay. Is it 50%? Is it 100%?
Right, if we set a limit.
Yeah, so I think what we need to do is think of some sort of mechanism, be it an economic payback mechanism or
Yeah.
something like that, that might,
Thank
you
you
know,
for
make
helping
it
me with those words, because I was having trouble coming
clearer,
up with
but-
that.
well, the discussion we had with Carolyn actually was very helpful to me
Yeah.
yesterday to understand this issue better, so.
Matt, the numbers you gave us for 143 and Tombstone Brewery, are they 100% of the fees waived, or are they 50%? Where are they? What did,
Yeah, the figures are the value of the site plan, building permit, and plan review fees for those
so that's
projects.
all of the,
None of them have been waived.
oh,
for
that's just
Tombstone.
if they,
Yeah.
If
Right,
they were
right,
to
just
be.
kind of give you an idea what the value is.
Yeah,
And
it-
again, the
It's a tough balance because we want good projects, you
Right.
know, in those areas, so we want to be able to provide an incentive.
And I think that's why I was coming up with ROI, return on investment, is because that way, no matter how big, how small, it helps us. So if a small business is going to bring in $10,000 over 5 years, it stands to reason that a larger business is going to bring in, I'm just gonna use 20,000, and we say within 5 years, that would be the amount we would waive, with the expectation of their projections.
So you would be proposing a tie, say, to sales tax production or something?
And income, property, I mean, not income, property tax and sales tax, yes.
We don't get much property tax, but
No, we don't, but it still could factor in.
about employment, a
Yeah,
factor
we'd
for
also-
Well,
have to
employment,
consider.
yeah, I mean, but we have ways of measuring those things, and that's what I'm saying. I don't know that it would be that difficult to come up with a formula to measure, and that, I feel like that would just make it fair across the board.
Tony, you think that's something we could do?
The sales revenue, the tax piece is easy.
The employment part is,
The job side, I think we can come up with a basis for it, and then we'll just have to infer the tax benefit of 5 jobs at $50,000 apiece.
And what that economic benefit is
Right.
expected to be, yeah. I'm trying to think where it doesn't seem like we're favoring big or small, that we're making it fair across the board. That's what I'm trying to, figure out how to do.
No, I mean, I think on the retail sales or a food and beverage would be very direct.
Right.
3 million of sales times, I mean, I think we can make that very simple. For a new construction project with jobs, we're just gonna have to make a couple of basic assumptions of the types of jobs, the income, and what that would look like for us.
Right, but they have a business plan. I mean, no one starting a business should not have a plan on how many employees they expect to have over the 5 years or 10 years or whatever we say.
I think you have a lot of faith in people.
I hope banks are not giving them money without these plans.
Well, I was about to say, wouldn't that be a
That's
kind
part
of
of
a
a requirement,
requirement?
yeah, for
that they
construction
have?
loans and any of that stuff, it is a requirement. So I'm just, again,
He's still
I was
laughing.
reading through this and thinking through it, I just was trying to find a way that it doesn't appear like we're picking winners, losers, big, small, that we're just being fair across the board.
And it would be better than making an arbitrary decision.
Yeah.
I agree.
We-
I agree.
I think that's
So,
the responsible
We
thing
need
to
to add a
do
return on investment
Yeah,
component,
to the
and insert it
equation.
there.
and basically, I'm looking at a 5-year timeframe
5 year, I think, is
is
fair.
reasonable.
Okay, we'll run some numbers, so I guess we'll pull this from the agenda for Thursday and come back to you at the next meeting with the changes then.
Okay.
All right, got that, Jill?
It's gonna make that first meeting in December. Busy.
Would we, if the same project that happened to have their fees waived, then later came to council with a development agreement, would we be told that they already had so much waived? To bring that into consideration,
Yeah, a development agreement is a little different situation, because there's a give and take there. A developer, they would like this, and this. The city would normally want something back in exchange, for that. This is a little cleaner to do it, as Matt's proposing, because, we're saying we want projects like this. Here's the criteria that qualify you. This is the amount of the incentive you can get as a result.
And I think it's
so if it came to us, an additional development agreement.
If they didn't like that, they could ask for a development agreement. And
In
we would
addition,
negotiate
let's
one.
say you already waived the
I think it would be
fees.
one or the other.
It would be only
It's one or the other.
yes.
Okay. Okay, thank
It
you.
wouldn't be both. yes.
Alright.
Yes, Richard?
I just think it's important that we state that these are the kind of incentives through state law we're allowed to give. I mean, that's another reason why we're doing this kind of thing, is because these are the tools we have at our disposal.
I would also like to add a provision for nonprofits or, those types of.
Matt?
Okay, so as proposed, there are 4 criteria associated with fee waivers: eliminating blight, adding employment, substantially improving an existing vacant or underutilized property, or making the building or site conforming to the adopted building codes. I mean, not all redevelopment projects are gonna involve retail enterprises. You could have medical, you could have professional services that don't generate that. The return would be through property taxes, not sales
Well,
tax.
also economic benefit.
Employment.
Right, in employment. So,
Oh,
as long as we consider those other redevelopment goals together with the fiscal return to the
I
city.
think we can do that.
Yeah.
Because those are similar, if you had a medical facility, I would view that similarly to a nonprofit coming in. That's a benefit to that area to have, a doctor's office or whatever.
But you understand what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I
Okay.
do understand what you're saying.
I'm really
think we
glad
can
you.
do this.
Oh, excuse me.
Go
I
ahead,
was just
Mike.
gonna say, I was really glad you brought that up. I was about to ask, what's the difference here between incentives and gifts, and how are we permitted to do that?
Yeah.
And, just throw that out there.
Yeah,
Kind
you're
of a
permitted because it's the incentive district that, meets the low mod income,
Oh,
Actually,
okay.
the Arizona legislature
Yeah,
put
through the
this
Arizona
into
revised
statutes as part of the
statutes.
Growing Smarter Plus legislation back in 2000 to
Okay.
give us an
You've already-
additional tool to
You've
help
already
you.
handled that.
Right.
The incentive district
Yeah.
piece.
Mhm.
Okay, got it. Thanks, thank you.
and I'm glad we can do this eventually, because like you said, they're mostly small first time, maybe
Right.
development that they're,
Need a
and they
little
don't
extra help.
have the unlimited funds that these bigger businesses have, so any little
They
bit
probably
helps.
object to you saying I'm.
And it will encourage, hopefully, business.
We'll hammer that out,
So it looks like we'll see this again,
maybe in December.
the first meeting, work session in December. Okay. Let me get back to my,
Did we get consensus that the hearing officer would be agreeable
I thought
as
we
the?
did that already.
for which item are you on?
On the same item, I'm just clarifying.
Under the
Matt
public
asked, said
appeal,
changing it to hearing officer, and I'm
That's what I
okay with
heard.
that.
Yeah.
That, okay, just wanna make
Well,
sure.
I would still wanna think a little bit more about that, Rachel, because
Okay.
I'm not necessarily sure you need to have that.
Okay,
Because I think the default is to go to a development agreement and have the council.
And that makes
well,
sense.
And again, if we clear some of these things up, we won't be as likely to need that,
That's
yeah.
because
So,
it'll be tired.
yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that ends item 6 then. And then we just, of course, go on to comments, request for council, call the public adjournment, et cetera. So we're now ready for, item B, report on trips, recent trips, meetings, and future meetings. I have coming up in the next 2 weeks, League of Cities, which will be on Zoom, of course. Arizona Regional EDF meeting coming up, a MPO meeting coming up, a Upper San Pedro Partnership / seminar meeting coming up within the next 2 weeks. So I'll be doing a lot of zooming around the internet. So, but
regional
I don't see.
transportation.
Yeah, and regional transportation was
It's coming up December 9th.
is coming up again as well, and we got an MPO. I didn't mention MPO. So a lot of meetings trying to get things cleaned up for the year. Nothing really life-threatening or exciting or sexy or anything else in the meetings, but that's what's keeping me off the streets for the next couple of weeks. Anybody else got any recent trips, meetings, future meetings? Okay, then we'll go on to future discussion items, council requests.
Yeah.
Did you have something?
I did. Everybody will remember several weeks ago, 2 gentlemen came to talk about trains. And they were asking us to prove what they were looking to do. And what they were looking to do is to work with Amtrak to be sure that we have a regularly scheduled train service to Benson. And Christine raised a question about how much government funds they were getting. And I think there was another question, but I don't remember what. Anyway, I got a couple of responses from them, and I'd like to put the item on the agenda again for us to pass a resolution that we at least concur that it would be a good idea to have regular train service to Benson. Part of that is a tourism issue. Let me just ask if our Economic Development Department has talked to them at all. Okay, I recommended that they speak just to give what they expect the economic development piece to be, to talk to our people. And so I'd like to put it on the agenda that we hear all the information again, and I would like to put the information I received from them already into the council reading room. And then they'll come to a meeting to answer any further questions we may have about what they're intending to do. What we talked about, but this was not directly a part of their plan, is that eventually, that Sierra Vista would become a part of the train schedule. And our name would be on the schedule, even though the train is coming into Benson. And then tourism would pick up because there'd be this regular access to Southeast Arizona on the schedule.
So what you're asking then essentially, Gwen, is a resolution of support be drafted by the staff for supporting the rail efforts in Benson. And we would discuss that at the next work session and the following, in the December meeting, we would vote up or down on whether we can have it. It's basically a resolution of support for the efforts of the passenger traffic to Benson.
Yeah, I was trying to remember the name, but there's a name for All Aboard Arizona is what it's called.
Any further discussion?
When-
Do I have, I'm looking for consensus is what I'm looking for.
Oh,
Of
sorry.
course, she can propose anything she wants, but
Fine. Well, you said draft a resolution. Are we also seeing the draft for the Hummingbird Capital for next work session?
I believe that'll be ready by the first, all of this is coming
Running
up
out of
at one
time.
time, but
somebody's in a hurry to get out the door. So.
You know, these things just came up. I had no, and I'm not tied to them personally. If it doesn't happen in December, somebody else hopefully will pick up the ball because I believe it's a good idea, but it's not my idea. I'm just bringing it forward.
Okay, any other future council requests or discussion items?
I think that was a yes, we can put it
Yeah,
on
we
the
can,
agenda.
yeah.
And I do have a sample resolution that'll be. we'll
So,
get-
but all we're putting on is just to talk about the proposal, right? We're not approving the
We,
proposal.
well, we're gonna talk about the proposal on the
Right,
first
that's what we're
meeting,
putting, okay,
And,
gotcha.
and if we have consensus, it'll stay on the agenda. If we don't have consensus,
Understood.
it comes off the agenda.
I just wanted to make sure.
A resolution on the meeting. Okay? We all clear as mud on that? Okay. If there are no other future discussion items or council requests, Mr. Patuchik, would you like to give us a city status on what's going on with the COVID for the city organization?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. As was reported in the paper, and as you're aware, we had some incidences of positive tests occur primarily in the police department. So we're taking all protocols and contact tracing there, and hopefully we'll start seeing some of those people back next week. It primarily affected special ops, and patrol is so far okay. So we expect to see some more patrol issues, but the chief assures me that he has the scheduling worked out for patrol. So I think we'll be able to handle it. It's just unfortunate that happened. As a result, and again, with the cases going up statewide and here in the county, we're going to continue to leave the buildings closed and facilities, which is really no change from where we were before. So I anticipate that to remain in effect until such time as we see perhaps the vaccine that was reported on yesterday come into play, and that's still a few months out. So if that occurs, then there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and we can start getting back to more normal operations. But I think for now in the winter we'll probably stay in the same status for the foreseeable future.
And I'll make a couple of comments. I know I talked to everybody a couple weeks ago about reinstating the mask order. I did that on Friday. I did that as out of an abundance of caution. If you remember back when we declared an emergency initially, we were at the point where the numbers were headed the wrong direction, and we were starting to be very short on the hospital space for local treatment. We are not yet at a point where it's critical for hospital space because of the advances in treatment primarily, and the fact that most of the folks are in a younger age group and aren't as drastically affected as the first go around. But when I see the numbers jump significantly, and they did in a 2-day, 3-day period, it can't be long if that continues where they're gonna have some challenges with hospitalizations. And we wanted to be preemptive, so it was preemptive in nature. And as Mr. Patuchik mentioned, it will probably not be, I will probably really not look at seriously removing it until such time as we get through Veterans Day, Thanksgiving Day, Christmas, New Year's, and hopefully the availability of a good vaccine. So that's kind of where we stand on the mask order and the logic behind it. Okay?
Speaking of Veterans Day, the video will be on.
Video will be up on the net at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
Okay?
Right when I'm going to sleep.
Yeah, right when she's getting up to cook pancakes for Rachel.
Yeah, right.
Anything else for the good of the order before we break? Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the quick and meeting to the point and the good work. Meeting's adjourned.